You need to leave. Right now. The word sliced through the golden air of Whitmore Jewelers, a place where crystal chandeliers glowed like halos and diamonds glittered like frozen stars. The store was a sanctuary of wealth, velvet counters, hushed voices, soft piano music playing overhead. But in one brutal instant, that delicate luxury shattered. Every head turned toward the scene at the front counter. A tall black woman stood there, her presence dignified, her hands resting calmly on the glass case. She wasn't dressed in designer brands, just a fitted blazer, dark jeans, and a silk scarf wrapped neatly around her hair. To most, she looked like an ordinary woman who had wandered into a world not meant for her. But this was Naomi Carter. A name whispered in boardrooms, written in Forbes, carried like fire through Wall Street. The CEO of Carter Enterprises, the woman who had built one of the most successful luxury brands in America. And the silent owner of Whitmore Jewelers itself. Yet, in this moment, none of that mattered. To the manager, she was just a black woman who didn't belong. His voice dripped with disdain as he stepped closer, hands folded like a gatekeeper. We don't allow people like you to handle these items. This is not a browsing store. If you can't afford to buy, don't touch. Gasps rippled through the air. A white couple froze mid-transaction, their eyes darting nervously. An elderly black woman whispered, "Lord, have mercy, did he just say that?" A teenager near the door raised her phone, the red light of live stream blinking to life. Naomi stood still, her face calm, though inside her chest, history echoed. She remembered her father telling her stories of the South, how he once walked into a diner in 1964 and was told, "Boy, you can't sit here." She remembered her grandmother humming old gospel hymns after being denied service in department stores. And now, decades later, the same poison dripped in a polished jewelry showroom. "Excuse me," Naomi said quietly. The manager smirked, his tone louder, meant for everyone to hear. "You heard me. These diamonds aren't for window shoppers. They're for real clients. People who belong here." His eyes swept over her skin, her scarf, her unassuming clothes. "And frankly, you don't." Phones lifted higher. Customers shifted uncomfortably. The piano music faded into silence, as if the store itself knew this was no longer just a transaction. The teenager live streaming typed furiously into the caption. "Black woman denied service at Whitmore Jewelers. Manager humiliates her in front of crowd." Within seconds, comments appeared on the feed. "Not again. 2025 and this is still happening. Wait, who is she?" But Naomi wasn't watching the cameras. She was looking directly into the manager's eyes, steady and unflinching. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, words spoken in a church pew long ago. "Baby, when they try to push you down, don't let anger eat you. Stand taller. Let them choke on the truth." So she stood taller. Naomi leaned forward slightly, her hand resting against the glass case that held a necklace worth more than the manager's yearly salary. Her reflection shimmered among the jewels, a black woman framed in brilliance that already belonged to her. "Tell me something," she said softly, but her voice carried across the room like thunder hidden in clouds. "Have you ever made the mistake of judging someone before you knew who they really were?" The manager laughed bitterly. "Lady, I don't need to know who you are. I can see exactly what's in front of me." The crowd shifted, murmurs rising. The live stream comments scrolled faster. "Oh, he's done. She's way too calm. Something's coming. Mark my words, this won't end like he thinks." Naomi smiled faintly, almost sadly, as if she'd heard this all before. Then, in a voice low enough that only those closest could catch it, she whispered. 5 minutes. That's all it will take for you to regret this." The room froze. The chandeliers above seemed to flicker, the silence heavy with suspense. 5 minutes. What did she mean? What storm was about to break inside this glittering palace of diamonds? The crowd leaned in. Cameras zoomed closer. Phones shook with anticipation. And the manager, oblivious to the trap he'd just set for himself, smirked, thinking he'd already won. The room shifted, as if time itself held its breath. Naomi Carter's quiet warning, 5 minutes, still hung in the air, rippling through every corner of the glittering jewelry showroom. But instead of pausing, instead of reflecting, the manager pressed harder, his arrogance growing louder beneath the crystal chandeliers. "You think you can threaten me?" he sneered, his voice echoing off the glass cases. "Lady, people like you don't scare me. You want to know what I see? I see a woman who doesn't belong in this store, trying to act like she does." He waved his hand dismissively, as if brushing her existence aside. "And if you don't leave right now, I'll call security. No, better yet, I'll call the police." Gasps spread across the showroom like wildfire. The words had been spoken too many times before in too many places. "I'll call the police." It was more than a threat. It was a weapon, sharpened by history. Naomi didn't move. She stood still, shoulders squared, her presence steady as stone. But inside, she heard her father's voice again, a story he told her at the kitchen table when she was just a girl. "They called the police on me too, baby. In Birmingham, 1965, for trying to buy groceries at a whites-only store. I wasn't breaking the law. But to them, I was guilty the moment I walked in. Remember this, Naomi. They'll try to make you small. Don't let them." She breathed in deeply, that memory grounding her like gospel roots. The teenager by the door tightened her grip on her phone, whispering to her friend, "He just threatened to call the cops. This is going viral." And it did. The live stream's numbers jumped from a few dozen to hundreds, then thousands. Comments poured in. "Don't tell me he just said that. She's too calm, something is about to go down. I think I know her face, isn't that?" But the crowd in the store still didn't know who they were standing before. To them, she was just a woman being humiliated for daring to stand at a counter lined with jewels. The elderly black woman, her hands trembling on her cane, spoke up softly but firmly. "Young man," she said to the manager, her voice quivering with age but sharp with wisdom, "you better be careful. You don't know who you're talking to." The manager scoffed. "Please. I've been running this store for years. I know exactly who belongs here and who doesn't." That sentence cut through the air like a knife. Who belongs? Two words heavy with centuries of exclusion, segregation, and pain. Naomi turned slightly, looking at the crowd now, not at the manager, but at the people who were watching. Her voice was calm, measured, almost like she was speaking from a pulpit. "Have you ever been judged before your truth could shine?" she asked softly, her eyes scanning the room. The question struck deep. Some lowered their heads, ashamed. Others nodded silently, as if remembering their own scars. The manager's face twisted with impatience. "Enough of this," he barked. "Security." Two guards appeared from the back, their postures stiff, their eyes trained on Naomi as if she were a criminal. One reached for his radio, muttering, "Possible trespasser." The teenager live streaming gasped. "They're calling her a trespasser." The comments section erupted. "She's literally just standing there. This is disgusting. Somebody needs to stop this." But Naomi didn't flinch. Instead, she reached down slowly, deliberately, and touched the smooth leather of her handbag. The movement made the guards tense, but all she pulled out was a small, worn item, a church fan, painted with the face of Martin Luther King Jr., edges faded from years of use. She held it in her hand like a shield, her grandmother's legacy still alive in every crease. "This fan," she said softly, "belonged to my grandmother. She carried it on hot Sundays in Montgomery, 1955, when she watched Rosa Parks take her stand. And I carry it now because her fight didn't end on that bus. Her fight is standing right here, in this store, today." The room fell silent. The guards hesitated, their radios still in hand, but their movements slowed. Customers shifted uneasily. The live stream comments exploded. "Goosebumps. This woman is powerful. Who is she?" The manager, growing red with anger, stepped closer. His voice trembled now, though he tried to mask it with authority. "You're finished. When the police get here, you'll wish you had just walked away quietly. Naomi tilted her head, her calm expression never breaking. 5 minutes, she repeated, her voice steady, almost like a hymn. That's all it will take. Not for me, but for you. The chandeliers flickered once more, as if heaven itself leaned closer to witness what was unfolding. The guards looked between the manager and Naomi, uncertainty creeping across their faces. The teenager's live stream had now hit 15,000 viewers, the comments scrolling so fast they blurred into a river of outrage and anticipation. Something was coming. Something the manager could not stop. And the crowd, every single person in that glittering palace of diamonds, could feel it rising like a storm. The sound of radios crackling filled the jewelry store. The security guards shifted uneasily, their hands near their belts, their eyes locked on Naomi Carter as though she were a threat to be subdued instead of a customer to be respected. "Dispatch, we have a situation," one of them murmured into his mic, his voice low but audible enough for everyone to hear. The word situation spread through the crowd like smoke from a fire. The manager smirked, mistaking the silence in the room for victory. "Good," he said, folding his arms across his chest. "Finally, this nonsense will end. I told you, lady, people like you don't belong in a place like this. And in a few minutes, the police will make sure you never set foot in here again." A murmur of disapproval rippled through the store. Not everyone agreed with him. Customers who had come to shop for wedding rings or anniversary gifts were now watching history unfold in front of them. Some whispered, others pulled out their phones, recording what they instinctively knew was bigger than a simple argument in a jewelry shop. The teenager holding the live stream tightened her grip on her phone, whispering to her friend, "It's at 20,000 now, oh my God, look at the comments." The scrolling text was a blur of outrage and disbelief. "This feels like something out of the 1960s. How is this still happening in 2025? Don't back down, Queen. Expose him." Naomi remained still, her posture regal, her church fan still in hand like a banner of quiet defiance. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence alone was louder than the insults hurled at her. But the manager wasn't done. He leaned closer, lowering his voice but not enough to keep others from hearing. "You're nothing but a distraction. People like you come into places like this pretending to belong. You'll never be more than a trespasser." Naomi's lips curved into the faintest smile, a smile that held no joy, only truth. "Have you ever wondered," she asked softly, her voice carrying across the room, "why every time you see someone like me, your first thought is trespasser and not customer?" The question landed heavy. A few people in the crowd nodded quietly, their expressions grim. The elderly black woman with the cane spoke again, her voice shaking but strong, "Because that's what they've been taught to see, child. But teaching can be unlearned." The crowd murmured, agreeing. The manager's face flushed red, his authority slipping. He turned sharply toward the security guards. "Why are you just standing there? Remove her." The guards hesitated. For the first time, doubt flickered in their eyes. The live stream had climbed to 30,000 viewers, the comments section now a flood of indignation. "Don't touch her. You'll regret this." "Wait, is that who I think it is?" Naomi exhaled slowly, her calmness radiating like a hymn sung in the middle of chaos. She thought of her grandmother's words, whispered into her ear at bedtime long ago, "When they try to strip you of your dignity, remember, you were born with it. They cannot take what God has already given." One of the guards reached forward cautiously, as if to escort her out. The teenager gasped. The phone shook slightly as the camera zoomed closer. "They're about to drag her out," she whispered breathlessly into the stream. The elderly woman's cane tapped firmly against the marble floor. "You lay one hand on her," she warned, her voice trembling with fury, "and you'll regret it. I know who she is. I know her face." The room stilled. The guard froze mid-step. The manager snapped, "Oh, please. She's no one. Some wannabe trying to stir up trouble. Look around you. She doesn't belong here." Naomi turned to face him fully now, her eyes unwavering. "You keep saying that word," she said softly. "Belong. Tell me, who decides who belongs, and who doesn't? You. Or justice? The chandeliers glittered above them, their light sharp and cold, as if the heavens themselves waited for his answer. But he had none. His silence spoke volumes. And then, sirens. The distant wail of police cars approaching the building. The crowd stiffened. Some pulled out their phones to record. Others whispered nervously, shifting their weight, wondering if they were about to witness something far darker than they had bargained for. The live stream comments spiraled into frenzy. No, not the cops. If they arrest her, it's over. Somebody please step in. The teenager's voice trembled as she held her phone steady. 35,000 watching, she's not backing down. Naomi didn't flinch. She stood taller, her grandmother's fan still in her hand, the faint outline of Dr. King's face catching the light. 5 minutes, she repeated calmly, her voice carrying over the growing tension. That's all it will take. 5 minutes, and you will see who really belongs here. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flashed outside the glass windows of the jewelry store. And with that, the crowd realized, they were seconds away from the breaking point. What happened in the next 5 minutes would not just decide Naomi's fate, it would decide theirs. The heavy glass doors of the jewelry store swung open with a thud. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, the red and blue glow of their squad cars painting their faces in shifting colors. The crowd parted instinctively, a hush falling over the room like a church after the last note of a hymn. The manager's smirk returned instantly. He straightened his tie, puffed out his chest, and motioned toward Naomi with the arrogance of a man who believed the law belonged to him. There, he said loudly, his voice dripping with false triumph. That's the woman causing the disturbance. Remove her immediately. She's trespassing. The word trespassing landed heavy. Phones tilted higher, every camera locked on Naomi, every viewer of the live stream, now over 50,000, waiting for her next move. The officers exchanged a glance. One of them approached Naomi carefully, his expression neutral, his hand resting near his belt. "Ma'am," he began, "we've been called here on a report of disturbance. I'll need to see some identification." Naomi didn't flinch. Her voice carried steady, low but powerful enough for the entire store to hear. "And if I provide it, officer, will you listen to me, or only to the man who called you?" The officer blinked, momentarily disarmed by her composure. The manager scoffed. "Don't waste your time with her riddles. Just do your job. People like her don't belong here." That word again. Belong. The elderly woman in the corner tightened her grip on her cane, her eyes blazing. The teenager whispered into her phone's mic, 55,000 now. Everyone's watching. Oh my God, this is about to go viral everywhere. Naomi's calm smile returned, her grandmother's church fan still in her hand. She raised it slightly, tilting it so the faintly worn face of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. caught the fluorescent light. "You keep saying I don't belong," she said softly, her words sharp as glass. "But let me show you exactly where I stand." She reached for her leather portfolio, resting against her side. Every eye followed her hand. The security guards stiffened, one taking a nervous step forward. The officers' hands hovered near their belts. The crowd held its breath. Naomi moved slowly, deliberately, pulling free a stack of neatly bound documents embossed with gold. The air seemed to hum with anticipation. She flipped the first page open and laid it on the glass counter with a soft snap that echoed louder than the chandeliers above. The seal of ownership glared back at everyone, Carter Holdings, sole proprietor of Carter Luxury Group. Beneath it, her signature, bold and unmistakable. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones zoomed in. The teenager screamed, "Oh my God, she owns this place." Naomi turned, her eyes locking with the stunned officer. "I am Naomi Carter," she declared, her voice steady, regal. "CEO of Carter Holdings. This store, this entire chain, belongs to me. The man who called you here. He works for me." The silence that followed was electric. The manager's smug grin shattered, replaced by wide-eyed panic. His lips parted, but no words came out. The officers froze, their postures shifting from authority to stunned realization. Naomi stepped closer to the manager, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a judge's gavel. "You didn't just disrespect me," she said, her voice low but carrying, "you disrespected the very foundation of justice. You denied me service in my own store, in front of witnesses, under the gaze of thousands online." The live stream exploded. Comments scrolled so fast they blurred into white streaks across the teenager's phone. "Queen energy. He's done. Imagine firing your own boss. This is history." The elderly woman lifted her chin, her voice trembling with pride. "I told you. I know her face. That's Naomi Carter. I watched her father march in Selma. And now his daughter stands here, carrying his legacy." The crowd erupted in cheers, claps, and shouts of vindication. Some cried openly, others raised their phones higher to catch every angle of the manager's humiliation. The police officer cleared his throat, his voice awkward now. "Ma'am, your identification checks out. We sincerely apologize. We weren't aware." Naomi cut him off gently but firmly. "No. You weren't aware because you didn't care to be. You walked in here ready to treat me like a criminal because of one man's word, without evidence, without thought. That's not just negligence. That's prejudice." The officers shifted uncomfortably, their faces reddening under the weight of truth. Naomi turned back to the manager, her eyes narrowing. "And you," she said slowly, "in 5 minutes, you will no longer work here. Your time, your authority, your cruelty, it ends today." The manager staggered back, pale as marble. You can't be serious." Naomi's voice rose, powerful, steady, carrying the echoes of her ancestors, of church choirs and civil rights marches. "I am the owner of this empire. And I promise you, justice always takes itself seriously." The chandeliers glowed above her, the crowd roaring, the live stream peaking past 70,000 viewers. The teenager's voice cracked with emotion as she whispered into her phone, "Y'all, she's about to fire him on the spot." The manager's hands trembled. The guards shifted nervously. The officers stepped back. The stage was set for a reckoning unlike any the store, or the city, had ever seen. And in that moment, Naomi Carter stood not just as a CEO, but as a symbol. The air inside the jewelry store felt heavy now, as if the chandeliers themselves bent lower to witness what was unfolding. The manager stood frozen, his hands trembling, his smirk gone, while Naomi Carter held the room in the palm of her hand. She took a slow breath, her grandmother's fan still resting between her fingers, the documents glowing under the lights. The crowd waited. The live stream ticked past 85,000 viewers. "This," Naomi began, her voice calm but laced with steel, "is not just about me. It never was. This is about something far greater. A sickness that has haunted this country for generations." The teenager holding her phone whispered into the mic, "She's about to preach, y'all, listen to this." Naomi stepped forward, turning slightly so her eyes scanned the crowd, the cameras, the police, and finally the pale-faced manager. "Today, I was denied service in my own store. I was told I didn't belong. That I was trespassing. That word, trespassing, has been used for centuries to keep people who look like me away from wealth, from dignity, from freedom. And you thought today would be no different." The manager swallowed hard, but Naomi's voice only grew stronger. "I've studied the numbers. I've chaired the committees. I've seen the statistics that prove what so many of us already know. According to the Department of Justice, Black Americans are nearly twice as likely to be denied loans, to be shadowed in stores, to be assumed guilty before they've spoken a word. And here we are again. Same pattern. Same prejudice." Gasps spread through the crowd. Some nodded, murmuring affirmations, their eyes wet with memory. Naomi lifted another document from her portfolio, a thick blue binder marked Internal Complaints, Carter Luxury Group. She held it high so the cameras could capture it. "These," she said, her tone cutting, "are the complaints I've received about this very location. Reports of racial profiling. Reports of humiliation. Reports ignored by the very man who stands before you. All eyes turned to the manager. His face drained of color. That's not true. It is true, Naomi thundered, her voice ringing like a church bell. Every complaint logged, every voice dismissed, every customer told they didn't belong. I gave you a chance to change. You chose arrogance. You chose cruelty. You chose to spit in the face of everything my family built. The elderly woman in the corner lifted her cane like a preacher raising a staff. Tell it, baby. Tell it, she shouted, and the crowd erupted in cheers, claps, and cries of "Amen." The officers shifted, their eyes darting between Naomi and the manager. One of them muttered quietly, "This is bigger than us." And it was. Because at that very moment, outside the store, news vans were pulling up. Reporters spilled out, cameras already rolling, microphones in hand. The scandal had leapt from live stream to headline in less than an hour. Naomi turned toward the officers. You see, she continued, when you walked in here, you saw a black woman and assumed criminality. You believed his word over my dignity. But the truth is this, I am the one who signs your department's donation checks. I am the one who funds community programs. I am the one who ensures your pensions are supported by this very company's investments. And yet here I stand, treated as if I were nothing. A murmur swept through the crowd, disbelief mixing with rage. The teenager's voice cracked as she narrated into her live stream, she's not just defending herself, she's exposing the whole system. This is history. Naomi pressed on, her voice softer now but burning with conviction. I think about my father, she said. How he marched in Selma. How he was told he didn't belong at lunch counters, at schools, at banks. And I wonder, what has truly changed, if I can be told the same in a place I own? Her words pierced the silence. Even the reporters who had entered the store lowered their cameras for a brief second, visibly moved. Naomi placed the binder down firmly on the counter, the sound echoing like a gavel strike. This store is not an isolated mistake. This is a mirror. A reflection of a nation still at war with its own conscience. And I will not let it continue, not in my name, not under my roof. The crowd roared, clapping, chanting, tears glistening in eyes that had seen too much and waited too long. The gospel hum of "We shall overcome" rose quietly from the elderly woman, her trembling voice soon joined by others until the store vibrated with song. The manager stepped back, shaking his head, his career collapsing before his eyes. This isn't fair, you're destroying me. Naomi turned slowly, her gaze sharp, her voice a blade. No. You destroyed yourself the moment you chose prejudice over humanity. Outside, the news anchors were already live, reporting breathlessly, Black CEO exposes systemic discrimination in her own store. Inside, Naomi's eyes locked on the cameras, her voice steady. This is bigger than jewelry. This is bigger than business. This is about dignity. And today, dignity wins. The live stream surged past 100,000 viewers, breaking records. The comments flew like sparks from a fire. She's speaking for all of us. This is Rosa Parks' energy. History is repeating, but this time, we're recording. And as the gospel chorus swelled, the weight of history pressed into the present moment. The reckoning was no longer private, it was public, viral, unstoppable. The jewelry store, once a place of whispered exclusivity and polished silence, now pulsed with the rhythm of something far greater than luxury. It felt like a church had been born in its walls, and Naomi Carter stood at the pulpit, her presence commanding every soul inside and every eye across the nation. The live stream had surpassed 125,000 viewers, spilling across social media platforms, hashtags igniting fires, hashtag dignity in diamonds, hashtag Naomi Carter, hashtag justice now. And within the store, the crowd became a living choir. The elderly woman with the cane began humming again, stronger this time. We shall overcome someday, her voice cracked but carried decades of pain and resilience. Soon, others joined, first in murmurs, then with rising conviction. The room filled with harmony, not polished or professional, but raw and alive. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of history pressing against her shoulders. She thought of her father, marching in Selma. She thought of her mother, who sewed Sunday dresses and baked cornbread while preaching dignity into her children's bones. She thought of the countless nameless ancestors who had survived ships, chains, fields, hoses, and jeers so that she could stand in this moment. And when she opened her eyes, she saw them all reflected in the faces before her, young, old, black, white, strangers, neighbors, all bound together by the undeniable truth of justice. A young man in a hoodie stepped forward, his voice loud enough for the cameras to catch. "Ma'am, I came here to buy a ring. But what you just gave us, that's worth more than diamonds. That's freedom." Applause thundered, shaking the glass cases that had once guarded wealth like a fortress. The store employees, who had shrunk back during the confrontation, now shifted uncomfortably. Two of them, a Latina saleswoman and a young black cashier, stepped forward, tears in their eyes. "Ms. Carter," the cashier said softly, we wanted to speak up before, but she gestured at the manager, "he threatened to fire us if we ever sided with customers. You gave us courage. Thank you." Naomi nodded, her face warm, though her voice remained steady. "Courage isn't something I gave you. It was already in you. Today, you simply decided to use it." The reporters pushed forward now, their cameras capturing every expression, every tear, every clap. One of them asked, "Ms. Carter, how do you respond to the national outrage this incident has sparked? Already, civil rights leaders are tweeting about you. Community organizers are calling this a turning point." Naomi's gaze swept over the crowd. She straightened her posture, her grandmother's fan still in her hand, now raised like a banner. "I respond the only way I know how, with truth. With unity. With dignity. What happened here is not new. It is the same old wound bleeding through a new suit. But today, this store became a stage for healing. For exposing. For lifting each other up." The elderly woman raised her cane again. "Testify," she shouted, and the crowd echoed her, laughter mixing with tears, grief turning into joy. Outside, the scene was no less powerful. Protesters had already gathered, holding makeshift signs scribbled in haste, "Dignity over diamonds, justice sells no prejudice, we belong everywhere." Choirs from local churches began arriving, their robes fluttering in the evening breeze as they lifted hymns that carried down the street, blending with car horns, camera shutters, and chants. Inside, Naomi turned back to the employees. "You have a choice," she told them. "To stand with what is right, or to continue under the shadow of fear. I will rebuild this store, not just in bricks and chandeliers, but in spirit. And every single one of you has the chance to help build something new." The Latina saleswoman spoke firmly now. "I quit under him. But if you'll have me, Miss Carter, I'll work for you with pride." The room erupted again, a chorus of agreement and cheers. And then, something remarkable happened. The police officers who had arrived earlier, their skepticism plain, now stepped forward. One of them, an older black sergeant, took off his cap and held it to his chest. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of service, "I came here tonight to enforce the law. But you reminded me that the law is empty without justice. On behalf of my department, I apologize. And I stand with you." The crowd gasped, then cheered louder than ever before. Naomi nodded slowly, her eyes glistening but unyielding. "An apology is a start. But standing with me means standing with us. With every person who has been told they don't belong. With every mother humiliated, every father dismissed, every child denied. This is bigger than me. This is all of us." The live stream exploded with comments. "Goosebumps, I'm crying right now. She's turning a store into a revolution. History unfolding, Naomi Carter is our modern Rosa Parks." The gospel choir outside grew louder, their voices reaching into the jewelry store, filling every corner with a harmony that felt like deliverance. Naomi lifted her fan once more, her voice cutting through the music. Her stand became their stand. My stand will become yours. Because when one of us rises, we all rise. The crowd erupted into chants, we rise. We rise. We rise. The chandeliers shimmered above them, no longer symbols of exclusion, but now reflecting the light of a people united. And as Naomi stood in the center of it all, dignified, resolute, unshaken, everyone knew, this was no longer about a necklace, or a store, or even her alone. It was about a movement. And the world was watching. The chandeliers above the jewelry store glittered like constellations, but no star in the sky shone brighter than the fire in Naomi Carter's eyes. The crowd had grown beyond the walls, hundreds gathered outside, thousands more watching online, millions following across news outlets. The store was no longer a store. It was a courtroom, a sanctuary, a stage where history itself was being rewritten. The disgraced manager stood pale and trembling, sweat dampening the collar of his expensive shirt. Moments ago, he had held the illusion of power, barking orders, humiliating customers, treating dignity like a currency reserved for the privileged few. Now, stripped bare by truth, he resembled nothing more than a child caught in a lie. "Ms. Carter," he stammered, voice breaking under the weight of his shame. "Please, I didn't know who you were." Naomi tilted her head, her voice calm, yet carrying the unshakable weight of justice. "And that is exactly the problem. You thought my worth depended on who I was, instead of what every person deserves. Respect. Dignity. Humanity." The silence that followed was sharper than any slap. The crowd leaned in. Phones hovered in the air, their red dots blinking like 1,000 unblinking eyes. The gospel choir outside lowered their voices, holding the final note of a hymn, as if waiting for judgment to fall. Naomi stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor like the steady drumbeat of justice. She raised the fan, her grandmother's fan, as if it were a gavel. And with that small but powerful motion, she delivered her verdict. "You are fired," she said, her voice slicing through the room. "Not just you, every corrupt manager, every employee who turned a blind eye, every person who allowed this rot to grow under my roof. This store will be reborn, and there is no place for bigotry in its foundation." Gasps filled the room. Reporters scribbled furiously, their cameras clicking like typewriters of history. The live stream comments exploded. "She said it. She fired them. Justice in real time, tears in my eyes. This is bigger than jewelry, this is revolution." The manager fell to his knees, begging now. "Please. I'll lose everything." Naomi's eyes softened for a moment, but her resolve never wavered. "For generations, my people lost everything, our names, our homes, our freedom, because men like you thought they had the right to decide who belonged. Today, you face only the consequence of your choices. Learn from it. Change from it. Or be forgotten by it." The choir outside swelled again, their voices like thunder rolling over the city. "We are not afraid, we are not afraid, today." Inside, Naomi turned to the employees who had spoken up earlier. She addressed them not just as workers, but as fellow witnesses to change. This store will be more than a place of commerce. It will be a place of legacy. A place where everyone, regardless of skin, status, or story, feels seen, respected, and valued. You will help me build it. Together. Tears streamed down faces. The young black cashier clasped her hands together like she was in prayer. The Latina saleswoman hugged her tightly, both of them sobbing openly now. Naomi raised her voice one last time, her words reaching far beyond the crowd, carried through screens into living rooms, churches, and hearts across the world. "Tonight, I was denied service in my own store. But in that denial, we uncovered a greater truth, that our worth is not determined by a title, or a bank account, or a piece of jewelry. Our worth is in the legacy we carry, the justice we demand, and the love we refuse to surrender. This is not just my victory, it is ours. One voice can lift generations. And tonight, we rise." The crowd erupted, the sound like waves crashing against centuries of stone, breaking them apart at last. People hugged strangers, tears mixed with laughter, voices lifted into hymns of hope. Outside, the choir sang louder, joined by the protesters, by children on their parents' shoulders, by elders who had marched decades before and now saw their dreams reborn. As Naomi stepped into the night air, the cameras flashed like lightning, but she walked steady, unshaken, her grandmother's fan still in her hand. The light from the store behind her spilled out onto the street, illuminating her figure as if she carried a torch for all to see. And in that glow, one truth became undeniable. This was more than the fall of a manager. This was a movement, a new beginning. Naomi Carter had not just reclaimed her dignity. She had given it back to her people.